You're 8 years old. Your parents are fighting in the kitchen. The volume rises, a glass breaks, and something inside you shifts. You don't cry, you don't hide. Instead, you do something strange. You walk into that kitchen. You stand between them. You say something, anything, to make it stop. You crack a joke. You spill something on purpose. You ask about dinner. You absorb their tension like a sponge. And somehow, miraculously, the temperature drops. And in that moment, a role is born. A role you never asked for. A role you'll carry for decades without ever knowing it has a name. You become the family peacemaker. This is the hidden trauma that nobody talks about, because from the outside, it doesn't look like trauma at all. It looks like maturity. It looks like emotional intelligence. It looks like being the good kid, the responsible one, the one everyone can count on. Teachers praise you for being wise beyond your years. Relatives remark on how helpful you are. Your parents tell their friends how lucky they are to have such a thoughtful child. And you learn to wear this like a badge of honor, never realizing it's actually a wound you're covering with gold. But underneath all that praise is a child who learns something devastating, that their value comes from keeping the peace. That love is something you earn by managing other people's emotions, that your own needs are an afterthought, or worse, a burden that threatens the fragile stability you work so hard to maintain. This is the story of what happens to that child, how the role shapes them, marks them, follows them into every corner of their adult life, and more importantly, it's the story of how they can finally put down the weight they've been carrying since before they could spell their own name. There's a concept in family systems psychology called triangulation. It was first described by psychiatrist Murray Bowen, one of the pioneers of family therapy, in his work developing what's now known as Bowen family systems theory. Bowen spent years observing families at the National Institute of Mental Health, and he noticed something that would become foundational to understanding how families function and dysfunction. He observed that when tension arises between two people in a family, they often unconsciously pull in a third person to stabilize the relationship. Think of it like a two-legged stool, suddenly sprouting a third leg. More stable, yes, but only because someone else is now bearing the weight. The tension between two people gets dispersed across three, making it more manageable for the original pair, but creating a new burden for the third person who's been drafted into service. In healthy families, this might look like parents occasionally venting to a trusted friend or seeking guidance from a therapist. The third point of the triangle is an adult, someone equipped to handle the emotional weight, someone who chose to be there. But in dysfunctional families, that third leg is often a child. And when a child is regularly pulled into the middle of adult conflicts, asked to mediate, comfort, take sides, or simply witness the chaos and provide a stabilizing presence, that child learns that their primary function in the family is to maintain equilibrium. Their job isn't to be a child. Their job is to be a regulator. The Bowen Center, which continues his work, describes triangles as the building blocks of larger emotional systems. A triangle is the smallest stable relationship system, they explain. A two-person system is unstable because it tolerates little tension before involving a third person. What they don't often say is how devastating it can be when that third person is 7 years old and just wants to watch cartoons. The peacemaker role is a specific form of what psychologists call emotional parentification. This is distinct from instrumental parentification, where a child takes on physical tasks like cooking meals, paying bills, or caring for younger siblings. Instrumental parentification is visible. You can see a 12-year-old making dinner. You can recognize that something is wrong when a child is managing the household budget, but emotional parentification is subtler and often more damaging precisely because it's invisible. There's no observable task to point to. The child becomes the family's therapist, the emotional regulator, the one who monitors everyone's moods and adjusts their behavior accordingly. They're not cooking dinner. They're managing the emotional temperature of the room so that dinner can happen without an explosion. Research published in the International Journal of Research and Review describes how emotional parentification of children, particularly girls, often involves being expected to take on the role of peacemaker or mediator, attempting to resolve family conflicts and facilitating communication between other family members. The researchers note that this role can lead to significant emotional distress as children struggle to understand their own emotions while constantly being expected to manage others' feelings. And here's the cruel irony that makes this particular wound so insidious. The child who takes on this role is often the most sensitive, the most attuned, the most capable of reading the emotional temperature of a room. These are gifts, real gifts. The ability to sense what others are feeling, to notice shifts in mood before they become obvious, to understand unspoken dynamics. These capacities can be tremendous assets in adult life. They make for good therapists, good leaders, good friends. But when these gifts are exploited before a child has developed their own sense of self, before they've had a chance to form their own identity, separate from their function in the family, those gifts become chains. The sensitivity that could have been a superpower becomes a prison. The attunement that could have fostered deep connections becomes a compulsion that never turns off. Let me tell you what it feels like from the inside, because unless you've lived it, it's hard to understand how all-consuming this role becomes. You develop a kind of sixth sense. It's not mystical, it's survival. Before anyone else notices that Dad's had a bad day at work, you've already registered the tension in his shoulders when he walked through the door. You noticed the slight edge in his voice when he said hello. You clocked the way he set down his briefcase just a little too hard, and without consciously deciding to, you've already started working, adjusting your behavior, moderating your voice, maybe cracking a joke to lighten the mood, maybe disappearing into your room to reduce the number of variables in the equation. Before Mom's sadness spills over into tears, you've sensed the shift in her energy. You've noticed she's been quieter than usual. You've registered that she's been staring out the window more, and you've started working, unconsciously, automatically, to prevent the spillover. You ask her about her day. You tell her something funny that happened at school. You give her a reason to smile, a distraction from whatever is weighing on her. You become a human barometer for other people's emotions. Your nervous system becomes a finely tuned instrument for detecting the emotional weather in any room you enter. Some researchers call this emotional hypervigilance, a state of constant alertness where your nervous system is perpetually scanning for threats. But the threats you're scanning for aren't physical dangers. They're not intruders or predators. They're emotional threats. The raised voice that might escalate into a fight, the heavy sigh that might precede a crying spell, the door that closes too hard, signaling that someone is upset and the household might be about to tilt into chaos. The Cleveland Clinic describes hypervigilance as a condition where someone is constantly on guard, always looking for hidden dangers. They note it's strongly linked to childhood trauma. For the Peacemaker child, those hidden dangers live in the subtle shifts of family dynamics. A change in someone's tone of voice, a loaded silence at the dinner table, the particular way someone sets down their fork that signals they're about to say something that will make everyone uncomfortable. And here's the thing, nobody tells you about hypervigilance. It's exhausting in a way that's almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. Imagine never being able to fully relax. Imagine that even in moments that should be peaceful, watching a movie with your family, eating dinner, sitting in the living room on a Sunday afternoon, part of your brain is always working, always monitoring, always preparing for the thing that might go wrong. This isn't paranoia. This isn't anxiety in the clinical sense, though it often leads there. This is adaptation. Your brain learned early that emotional storms in your family were dangerous. Maybe not physically dangerous, but emotionally devastating. When your parents fought, the whole household became unbearable. When one of them was upset, it colored everything. So your brain did what brains do. It developed an early warning system. It learned to detect the signs of an approaching storm so you could take action, so you could intervene, so you could do your job. The problem is, that warning system never turns off. It was installed in childhood, when it was necessary for survival, but it doesn't know how to deactivate itself. Even decades later, in safe relationships, in calm environments, in a home of your own with people who love you and don't require constant management, you're still watching, still scanning, still bracing for impact that never comes, still doing a job that no longer exists. And the exhaustion of this, the bone-deep tiredness of being on alert for 30, 40, 50 years, is something that people who didn't grow up this way simply cannot understand. When they say, just relax, they don't realize they're asking you to turn off a system that doesn't have an off switch. When they ask why you're always so tense, they don't understand that tension has been your baseline for as long as you can remember. You don't know what it feels like to not be monitoring the room. You don't know what true relaxation actually is. There's a term that psychotherapist Pete Walker introduced in his work on complex post-traumatic stress disorder that captures something crucial about the Peacemaker's experience: the Fawn response. You've probably heard of fight, flight, and freeze, the classic trauma responses that have been discussed for decades. When faced with danger, you either fight back, run away, or freeze in place. These are the responses most people learn about. But Walker, drawing on his extensive clinical experience with survivors of chronic childhood trauma, identified a fourth response that had been largely overlooked: fawning. He described it in his book, Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, and the concept has since gained widespread recognition because it explains so much that the other three responses don't. Fawning is the nervous system's attempt to survive a threat by becoming more appealing to it. It's what happens when you can't fight because the threat is bigger than you, or because fighting back has consequences you can't afford. It's what happens when you can't flee because you're a child, you're dependent, you have nowhere to go. It's what happens when freezing doesn't work because the threat isn't going away, because you have to keep functioning, because someone needs you to show up. So you appease, you accommodate, you make yourself useful. You merge with the wishes and needs of the person who holds power over you. You become what they need you to be. You anticipate their desires before they express them. You smooth over potential conflicts before they erupt. You become, in essence, a shapeshifter, constantly adjusting yourself to match the emotional requirements of the moment. For the family peacemaker, fawning becomes a way of life. It's not a response you deploy in moments of crisis. It's your default operating system. You learn to read your parents' needs before they even express them. You learn to sense when tension is building and to intervene before it escalates. You learn that the way to stay safe, the way to maintain connection with the people you depend on for survival, is to make yourself indispensable as an emotional stabilizer. Dr. Ariel Schwartz, a clinical psychologist who specializes in complex trauma, describes the fawn response as involving people-pleasing to the degree that an individual disconnects from their own emotions, sensations, and needs. In childhood, this occurs because they must withhold expressing their authentic emotions of sadness, fear, and anger in order to avoid potential wrath or cruelty from a parent or caregiver. As a result, they turn their negative feelings toward themselves in the form of self-criticism, self-loathing, or self-harming behaviors. Read that again. They disconnect from their own emotions, sensations, and needs. This is the hidden devastation of the peacemaker role. It's not just that you learn to take care of others. It's not just that you became skilled at managing emotions and navigating conflict. It's that you learned to disappear yourself in order to do it. You learned that your emotions were less important than the family's stability. You learned that your needs were a threat to the peace you were working so hard to maintain. You learned to suppress yourself so completely that eventually you lost access to who you actually were underneath the role. Let me be specific about what gets lost, because this is where the hidden becomes truly invisible. When you spend your childhood monitoring everyone else's emotional state, you don't develop the capacity to monitor your own. Your attention is always directed outward, scanning the room, reading faces, anticipating needs, the skill of looking inward, of asking yourself what you feel or what you need. That skill never gets developed because there's never space for it. There's always something more urgent. There's always someone else who needs attention first. When every situation requires you to assess what others need, you never learn to ask what you need. The question itself starts to feel foreign, even selfish. What do I want? Who has time for that? What I want is for everyone to be okay. What I want is for there not to be a fight. What I want is peace. And so your wants collapse into a single, all-consuming want, the absence of conflict. Your desires become entirely reactive, defined by what you don't want rather than what you do. When your worth is measured by how successfully you keep the peace, you never develop an intrinsic sense of your own value. Your worth becomes contingent, conditional, always dependent on your performance. Did you prevent the fight? Then you have value. Did the conflict escalate anyway? Then you failed. There's no baseline of self-worth that exists independent of your function. You are what you do for others. Take that away, and you're not sure what's left. Dr. Jonas Webb, who has written extensively about childhood emotional neglect, describes a cluster of experiences that she calls running on empty, the title of her influential book on the subject. She describes how children who grew up this way often experience a persistent sense of emptiness, a feeling that something vital is missing inside. They struggle to identify their own feelings, a condition sometimes called alexithymia, which literally means no words for emotion. They have difficulty asking for help, not because they're too proud, but because it genuinely doesn't occur to them that their needs matter or that asking for help is even an option. Webb's research identifies several hallmarks of childhood emotional neglect that apply directly to the Peacemaker experience. Feeling like something is wrong with you without knowing what. Having trouble with self-discipline, either too much of it, rigidly controlling yourself, or too little, because you never learned healthy self-regulation. Feeling numb or empty. Finding it hard to ask for help or to receive it. Being harder on yourself than you would ever be on others. A tendency toward guilt and shame. Feeling different from other people, like you're on the outside looking in. This isn't selflessness. It's not the noble sacrifice of putting others first. It's self-erasure. It's the systematic dismantling of a self that never got the chance to fully form. And it happens so gradually, so early in development, that most peacemakers don't even realize anything is missing. They think this is just how they are. They think everyone feels this way. It's not until decades later, often in a therapist's office or in the middle of a crisis, that they finally stop long enough to notice the void where their sense of self should be. There's a concept in psychology called differentiation of self, another foundational contribution from Murray Bowen's work. Differentiation is one of the 8 core concepts in Bowen family systems theory, and many consider it the cornerstone of the entire framework. It refers to a person's ability to maintain their own identity, their own values, their own emotional equilibrium, while remaining connected to others. A well-differentiated person can be close to someone without losing themselves. They can love deeply and still know where they end and the other person begins. They can disagree without feeling like the relationship is threatened. They can be in the presence of someone else's strong emotions without absorbing those emotions as their own. They can say no without guilt and yes without resentment. They can have their own thoughts and beliefs, even when those differ from the people around them. The family peacemaker typically has very low differentiation. Because their identity was built around managing others' emotions, they never developed a solid sense of who they are, separate from their role. Their boundaries are porous, not because they're weak, not because they lack willpower, but because they were never allowed to have boundaries in the first place. Every time they tried to have a need, it was either ignored or treated as a problem. Every time they expressed a preference, it was overridden by the needs of the family system. Every time they had an opinion, it was shaped by what would keep the peace, rather than what they actually thought. Bowen himself wrote that people with poorly differentiated selves depend so heavily on the acceptance and approval of others that they either quickly adjust what they think, say, and do to please others, or they dogmatically proclaim what others should be like and pressure them to conform. The peacemaker typically falls into the first category, endlessly adapting, endlessly accommodating, endlessly suppressing their authentic self to maintain the harmony. They become what Bowen called a chameleon, changing colors to match their environment, never quite sure what color they actually are underneath. Researchers at the Georgetown Family Center, founded by Bowen himself, describe how this low differentiation plays out across generations. Children learn their level of differentiation from their families of origin. A poorly differentiated parent raises children who are also poorly differentiated because that's all they know how to model. The peacemaker child, never having experienced what healthy boundaries look like, grows up unable to create them. And when they have children of their own, they often recreate the same dynamics, either by becoming the volatile parent who needs managing, or by creating new peacemaker children to carry on the family legacy. Let me tell you about what happens when the peacemaker child becomes an adult. Because these patterns don't stay contained in childhood. They don't resolve themselves once you leave home. They follow you into every relationship you'll ever have. Romantic, platonic, professional. They shape your entire life in ways you often don't recognize until something forces you to look. The adult peacemaker often finds themselves in relationships that feel eerily familiar. Not comfortable, familiar. There's a difference. Comfortable is relaxing, easeful, secure. Familiar is recognizable, known, like coming home, even if home was chaotic. The adult peacemaker is drawn to partners who need managing, who are emotionally volatile, who require constant tending. They find themselves attracted to people with addiction issues, mental health challenges, chronic crises that need solving. Not because they're masochistic, not because they want to suffer, but because that's what love feels like to them. That's the only kind of love they know how to do. Melody Beattie, who wrote the seminal book Codependent No More in 1986, observed this pattern in her work with families affected by addiction. She found the people who grow up managing others' chaos, she called them codependents, often seek out the same chaos in adulthood. They find partners who generate drama, friends who need rescuing, jobs that demand constant emotional labor. Not because they enjoy it, but because they've confused caretaking with connection. They've learned that love means work, endless, exhausting work to keep someone else stable. A relationship where they don't have to work, where they're not needed in that fundamental way, doesn't feel like love. It feels empty. It feels wrong. It feels like they're failing at something, even though there's nothing to fail at. The peacemaker becomes the fixer in their relationships. They attract partners who need fixing. They become the emotional hub of every friend group, the one everyone calls when they're in crisis at 2 a.m. They're the employee who takes on everyone else's problems, the co-worker who mediates conflicts, the family member who organizes every holiday and manages every relationship. They're the person who's always available, always accommodating, always smoothing things over, always managing, always on. Sharon Martin, a psychotherapist and author who specializes in codependency, describes how taking care of other people and being concerned with their well-being can become pathological when it becomes the priority above and beyond taking care of our needs. The peacemaker often struggles to see their own behavior as problematic because the behavior itself looks virtuous. They're helpful, they're caring, they're the reliable one. But when that helpfulness comes from compulsion rather than choice, when it comes at the expense of their own well-being, when they're unable to stop even when they're depleted, that's when it becomes a problem. And here's what nobody tells them. This isn't generosity. It's not compassion. It's not being a good person. It's a trauma response, wearing generosity's clothes. The inability to stop helping, the compulsion to manage, the constant availability. These aren't virtues. They're symptoms. They're what happens when a child learns that their value is contingent on their usefulness, and they spend the rest of their life trying to be useful enough to earn love. The research on attachment styles, building on the foundational work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, helps explain why this pattern persists across the lifespan. Bowlby, a British psychiatrist working in the mid-20th century, showed that the bonds we form with our primary caregivers in early childhood create what he called internal working models, templates for all our future relationships. These models shape our expectations about whether others will be there for us, whether we're worthy of love, and how relationships fundamentally work. Children who had caregivers who were inconsistent, sometimes available, sometimes absent, sometimes loving, sometimes volatile, often develop what's called an anxious attachment style. They learned that caregivers could be there, but they couldn't count on it. They learned that love was available, but unpredictable. So they developed strategies to secure that love, to prevent abandonment, to hold on to connection. They became hypervigilant to signs of rejection. They learned to work hard to keep the other person happy. Anxious attachment is characterized by a deep fear of abandonment and rejection that shapes every relationship. People with this style often seek constant reassurance from partners. A brief delay in texting back can trigger intense anxiety. A partner's bad mood can feel like a threat to the entire relationship. They sacrifice their own needs to keep the relationship stable because any disruption feels like it could lead to abandonment. They're hypervigilant to their partner's emotional states. Sound familiar? Scanning constantly for signs that something is wrong, that they've done something to displease, that the person might be about to leave. Does this sound like the peacemaker child all grown up? It should. The anxious attachment style is essentially the adult continuation of the peacemaker pattern, still scanning for danger, still working to prevent abandonment, still believing that their value lies in how well they manage someone else's emotional world. The threat has changed. It's no longer their parents' marriage that might fall apart. It's their own relationship. But the response is exactly the same. Constant vigilance, constant accommodation, constant suppression of their own needs in service of maintaining the connection. But here's where it gets more complicated. Sometimes the peacemaker doesn't develop anxious attachment. Sometimes they swing to the opposite extreme and become avoidantly attached, keeping people at arm's length, refusing to need anyone, maintaining rigid independence as a way to protect themselves from the pain of being a perpetual caretaker. It's not that they don't want connection. They do. But connection has always meant work. Connection has always meant losing themselves. Connection has always meant being responsible for someone else's well-being while ignoring their own. So they opt out entirely, They build walls. They don't let people in. And they tell themselves, this is freedom, this is self-sufficiency, this is strength, never realizing it's actually a different kind of wound. Either way, whether the peacemaker clings or withdraws, the underlying injury is the same, a fundamental confusion about what love actually is. For them, love has always been a job. It's always involved work, vigilance, sacrifice, management. They've never experienced love as something freely given, something they deserve simply for existing. They've never known what it feels like to be loved without earning it, without working for it, without being useful. The very concept seems foreign, maybe even suspicious. If someone loves them without requiring anything in return, there must be a catch. Something must be wrong. I want to talk about anger, because this is where the hidden trauma becomes even more hidden, where the wound folds in on itself and becomes invisible, even to the person carrying it. Peacemakers are not allowed to be angry. That was the implicit rule in their childhood home, communicated through countless small moments, absorbed before they had words for what was happening. Anger was the thing that caused the explosions. Anger was what made Dad slam doors, what made Mom cry, what turned a regular evening into a nightmare. Anger was the enemy. Their entire role was predicated on preventing anger, soothing anger, managing anger, keeping anger from escalating into something worse. How, then, could they turn around and feel anger themselves? To feel angry would be to become the problem. It would be to join the enemy. It would be to threaten the very peace they devoted their entire childhood to maintaining. So they learned not to feel it, or rather, they learned not to acknowledge it, not to express it, not to let it exist in any visible form. But here's what nobody tells you about suppressed emotions. They don't disappear. They don't evaporate just because you refuse to acknowledge them. They metabolize. They transform. They find other ways to express themselves, often in forms that don't look anything like the original emotion. Suppressed anger metabolizes into depression. It turns inward, becomes self-directed. If you can't be angry at the people who hurt you, you become angry at yourself. You become self-critical, perfectionistic, never satisfied with your own efforts. The anger that should have been directed outward had parents who put adult burdens on child shoulders, had a family system that exploited your sensitivity, gets redirected at the only safe target, yourself. Suppressed anger metabolizes into chronic illness. The body holds what the mind refuses to acknowledge. Bessel van der Kolk, the trauma researcher whose book The Body Keeps the Score, has transformed how we understand trauma. Documents the extensive research showing how emotional trauma manifests in physical symptoms. Chronic tension that never releases because you're always braced for conflict. Digestive problems because your nervous system never learned to rest and digest. Autoimmune conditions where the body attacks itself, perhaps a physical metaphor for all that self-directed anger. Headaches that won't quit. Back pain with no structural cause. Fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Suppressed anger metabolizes into a low-grade resentment that colors everything but is never directly expressed. The peacemaker smiles while seething inside. They say yes while internally screaming no. They accommodate requests they don't want to fulfill, and the anger leaks out sideways in passive-aggressive comments, in forgotten commitments, in a tone of voice that says, "I'm fine," when everything about them is saying otherwise. Some peacemakers become overtly passive-aggressive, unable to say what they actually feel, unable to express anger directly. They communicate through indirect channels. The sigh that says, "I'm disappointed," without using words. The withdrawal that punishes without ever being acknowledged as punishment. The subtle sabotage, forgetting to do something important, being late, making small mistakes, that expresses the anger they can't admit to having. Others become people who explode seemingly out of nowhere. They suppress and accommodate for weeks, months, years, and then suddenly, over something seemingly trivial, the wrong word, a minor inconvenience, a small disappointment, decades of suppressed frustration breach the dam. The explosion is terrifying, out of proportion to the trigger, and deeply confusing to everyone involved, including the peacemaker themselves. How did I get so angry over something so small? They wonder, not realizing that the anger wasn't about the small thing at all. It was about everything, all of it. Decades of swallowed rage finally forcing its way out, and others simply go numb. They disconnect from their anger so completely that they no longer even recognize it as an option. If you ask them whether they're angry, they genuinely don't know. They've become so skilled at not feeling it that they've lost access to the emotion entirely. This might look like peace, and they might describe themselves as peaceful people who don't really get angry. But it's actually a profound disconnection from themselves. They've amputated a part of their emotional range, and the surgery was so successful that they don't even feel the phantom limb. Here's what I want you to understand. If you recognize yourself in any of this, your anger is not a character flaw. Your anger is not a failure of peacemaking, not evidence that you're bad at the role you were assigned. Your anger is evidence of a crime. Something was taken from you. Your childhood was taken. Your right to have needs was taken. Your permission to exist outside of your function was taken. Your opportunity to develop a self, to be a child, to need without apologizing. All of it was taken in service of a family system that exploited your sensitivity and made you responsible for things no child should have to be responsible for. That theft deserves anger. The anger is appropriate. The anger is, in fact, healthy. The problem isn't that you have it. The problem isn't that you feel rage when you finally let yourself look at what happened. The problem is that you were never allowed to express it, never allowed to feel it, never allowed to direct it where it belonged. The problem is the suppression, not the emotion. Let me address something that often comes up when people start to recognize themselves in this pattern, when they start to see their family dynamics for what they were: guilt. Specifically, the guilt of acknowledging that your family hurt you, even if they loved you. The guilt of being angry at parents who may have tried their best. The guilt of naming dysfunction in a family that everyone says was normal, was fine, was better than a lot of families. Because here's the thing that makes this so complicated. Most parents who create peacemaker children aren't monsters. They're not cartoon villains rubbing their hands together, cackling as they burden their child with adult responsibilities. They're not consciously thinking, "I'll make this kid responsible for my emotional well-being, and who cares what it costs them." That's not how it works. They're people who were themselves wounded, often in the same ways. Your mother, who needed you to be her emotional support, may have had a mother who was emotionally unavailable to her. Your father, whose rage you learned to manage, may have grown up in a home where rage was everywhere and no one taught him how to handle it. They're people who didn't have the emotional resources to manage their own lives, let alone the emotional lives of their children. They did what they could with what they had. They didn't know any better. They loved you, even as they were hurting you. And this is true. All of it is true. It's valid. It's important to hold space for. Understanding intergenerational trauma, understanding that dysfunction passes down through family lines, that your parents were shaped by their parents, who were shaped by their parents, is a crucial part of healing. But it doesn't change the impact on you. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't make the hurt disappear. Knowing that your parents did their best doesn't retroactively give you the childhood you needed. Recognizing that they were wounded doesn't heal your wounds. You can hold compassion for your parents and still acknowledge that what happened wasn't okay. These two things can coexist. You can understand why they did what they did and still grieve what it cost you. You can love them and be angry at them. You can appreciate what they gave you and mourn what they couldn't. These aren't contradictory positions. They're the complicated truth of being human, of being wounded by people who were themselves wounded, of loving people who hurt you even as they tried to love you back. The work of healing isn't about blame. It's not about building a case against your parents, marshalling evidence, winning some imaginary trial where you emerge vindicated and they're found guilty. Blame is a trap. It keeps you focused on them, what they did, why they did it, how they justify it, when healing requires you to focus on yourself. The work is about telling the truth. It's about naming what happened so you can finally stop carrying it unconsciously, so you can stop reenacting patterns you don't understand, so you can stop wondering why you do the things you do. It's about saying, this was real, this happened, this affected me, and I deserve to be free of it. So how do you begin to heal? What does recovery from the peacemaker role actually look like? How do you put down a burden you've been carrying so long that your muscles have shaped themselves around it? The first step, and it's harder than it sounds, is to recognize that you have needs. This seems so obvious it barely deserves mentioning. Of course you have needs. Every human has needs. But for the peacemaker, truly recognizing this is revolutionary. Your entire psychological architecture was built around attending to others. The circuitry for attending to yourself may be underdeveloped, atrophied from disuse, or missing entirely. When peacemakers first start trying to identify their needs, they often draw a blank. What do you need? I don't know. I'm fine. What do you want for dinner? Whatever you want. What would make you happy? I just want everyone to be okay. The question keeps getting deflected, redirected, answered with someone else's needs. It takes practice, actual, deliberate practice, to start turning attention inward. Start small, absurdly small. When you're tired, notice that you're tired. Just notice it. You don't have to do anything about it yet. Just register. I am tired right now. When you're hungry, notice that you're hungry. When something irritates you, notice the irritation. Don't immediately try to fix it, justify it, minimize it, or suppress it. Don't immediately pivot to someone else's needs. Just notice. Say to yourself, I am irritated right now. That's step one. That's the foundation. This is what therapists call building emotional literacy, learning to read your own internal signals the way you've been reading everyone else's for your whole life. You're fluent in other people's emotions. You're a native speaker. But your own emotional language is like a foreign tongue you once knew as a child and have mostly forgotten. You need to relearn it, word by word, feeling by feeling. The next step is practicing boundaries. For peacemakers, boundaries feel dangerous. They feel like abandonment in disguise. Every time you say no, every time you prioritize yourself, every time you let someone else be uncomfortable so that you can be comfortable, some part of you braces for catastrophe, for rejection, for punishment, for the relationship to end, for love to be withdrawn. This is the old programming talking. It was true when you were a child, when you were dependent on your caregivers, when you had no choice but to accommodate their needs. It's not true now. Start practicing small no's. Not the big ones yet, not the ones that feel like they'll destroy relationships. Start with the small, low-stakes ones. Say you can't make it to the event you don't really want to attend. Don't immediately say yes when someone asks for help. Pause. Actually consider whether you have the capacity and give an honest answer. Create space between a request and your response. Buy yourself time. I'll think about it and get back to you. This simple phrase can be revolutionary for someone who spent their life immediately accommodating. Notice the anxiety this creates. Notice how your body reacts when you say no. The tightness in your chest, the fear that you've done something wrong. And then notice that nothing catastrophic happens. The world doesn't end. The person doesn't abandon you. In fact, many people will respect you more. Many people will like you more. The relationships that can't survive your boundaries weren't relationships at all. They were arrangements, transactions, systems of exploitation dressed up as love. Therapist Katie Gillis writes about healing from dysfunctional family dynamics, and she notes that learning to set boundaries involves recognizing your own needs and limits and practicing assertiveness. For many survivors, this often means having to learn what a boundary even is. The concept itself is foreign. A boundary is where I end and you begin. It's what I'm willing to tolerate and what I'm not. It's a line that says, this side is mine to control, and that side is yours. If you grew up in an enmeshed family system where everyone's emotions bled into everyone else's, you may have no idea where such a line would even go. There's something that happens when peacemakers start to heal, and it's both liberating and terrifying at the same time. They get in touch with their own wants, not just their needs, the basic requirements for survival, but their wants, their preferences, their desires, the things that would bring them joy, pleasure, fulfillment. For so long, you may have operated on autopilot, doing what was expected, what was needed, what would keep the peace. If someone asked what you wanted for dinner, you said whatever you want, and you genuinely thought this was being easygoing, being flexible, being a good partner. You didn't realize it was abdication. If someone asked your opinion, you said what you thought they wanted to hear, not because you were dishonest, but because their comfort had become more real to you than your own truth. The question, what do I want, may have felt genuinely unanswerable, not because you were keeping the answer secret, but because you had no idea what it was. But buried under all that accommodation is a self, an authentic self with preferences and dreams and desires, a self that wanted things before it learned that wanting was dangerous, a self that had opinions before it learned that opinions could cause conflict. That self didn't die. It just went underground. It learned to hide so well that even you forgot it was there. Part of healing is an archaeological dig. You start to excavate. You brush away the layers of accommodation and people-pleasing and find out what's underneath. What did you love as a child before you became the caretaker? What activities made you lose track of time? What sparked your curiosity? What would you do if no one else's needs were part of the equation? What would your life look like if you didn't have to manage anyone? These questions might feel uncomfortable. They might even feel selfish. And if they do, notice that. Notice how wanting things for yourself triggers guilt. Notice how even imagining a self-directed life feels like betrayal. That's the old programming. That's the voice of the family system that needed you to not have wants. It's not selfish to have a self. It's not selfish to know what you want. It's the most fundamental thing there is. It's the baseline from which everything else grows. I want to talk about grief because healing from the peacemaker role requires it. Grief is the price of admission for this work, and there's no way around it, only through. You will need to grieve the childhood you didn't have, the one where you got to be a child, where adults handled adult problems and you were free to play, to make mistakes, to have needs without apologizing for them, to throw tantrums and be comforted instead of comforting, to be selfish in the way children are supposed to be selfish because that's how they learn they exist. That childhood was stolen from you. You didn't get to miss it because you didn't know it existed. You had nothing to compare your experience to, but it existed. Other children had it. You deserved it. And it's not coming back. That loss deserves to be mourned. Not quickly, not neatly, not in a weekend workshop. Real grief, the kind that comes in waves, the kind that ambushes you when you're not expecting it, the kind that makes you cry for a child you don't fully remember being, for a life you never got to live. You will need to grieve the fantasy of the family you wished you had. Many peacemakers carry an idealized image of their family, the one where everyone got along, where the peace you worked so hard to maintain was real and lasting, where your parents loved each other and you and everything was fundamentally okay. This fantasy served an important purpose. It made your childhood survivable. It gave you hope. It allowed you to believe that all your effort was worth it, that the peace you were fighting for was achievable. Letting go of that fantasy means accepting the imperfect, sometimes painful reality. It means accepting that your parents were limited, that their love was real, but their capacity was constrained, that your childhood was marked by dysfunction that wasn't normal, wasn't okay, wasn't something you had to accept as just how things are, that the story you told yourself to survive, the story where everything was fine, where you had a good childhood, where you can't complain because other people had it worse, isn't the whole truth. And you may need to grieve the relationships that don't survive your healing. Because when you stop being the peacemaker, some people won't like it. Family members who relied on you to manage their emotions may resist your new boundaries. They may call you selfish, cold, different. They may increase the pressure, hoping to snap you back into your role. Partners who are comfortable with you doing all the emotional labor may find the new arrangement threatening. They may leave, or they may force you to leave. Friends who only knew you as the one who's always there, always available, always accommodating, may not know how to handle you having needs of your own. This is painful. There's no way around that. And it's also necessary, because the relationships that only worked when you were disappearing yourself weren't relationships. They were arrangements. They were systems of extraction where you provided emotional labor and received just enough connection to keep you working. Real relationships can hold your wholeness. They can handle your boundaries. They can meet your needs, not just extract from you endlessly. The people who can't adjust to the real you were never actually in relationship with you. They were in relationship with your function. Let me tell you what's possible on the other side of this work, because it's not all grief and loss. There's something waiting for you on the other side, and it's worth the journey. Imagine waking up in the morning and not immediately scanning for problems to solve. Imagine your first thoughts being about yourself, what you need today, what you're looking forward to, rather than an assessment of everyone else's emotional states. Imagine lying in bed for a few extra minutes because you want to, not because you're exhausted from vigilance you can't turn off. Imagine being in a room with tension and not feeling compelled to fix it. Imagine letting other people have their conflict without inserting yourself. Imagine trusting that adults can handle their own emotions, that it's not your job to manage them, that you can simply be present without being responsible. Imagine the relief of that, the lightness of putting down a weight you've carried so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. Imagine someone else being upset and feeling compassion for them without absorbing their emotion as your own responsibility. Imagine being able to say, "I'm sorry, you're struggling," without immediately adding, "What can I do to fix it?" Imagine holding space for someone without climbing into their pain with them, without losing yourself in their experience. Imagine being able to say, "I don't know," when someone asks what you need, and sitting with that uncertainty instead of immediately filling the silence with what you think they want to hear. Imagine treating not knowing as information rather than failure. Imagine giving yourself permission to figure it out as you go. Imagine relationships where you're not the only one doing the emotional labor, where conflict can happen without it feeling like the end of the world, where you can disagree with someone and not immediately sacrifice your position to keep the peace, where you can express anger and still be loved, where you can have needs and have them met. Imagine knowing in your bones, in the deepest part of yourself, that you are worthy of love, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, that your value isn't contingent on your usefulness, that you don't have to earn the right to exist, that you deserve to take up space in your own life. This isn't a fantasy. This is what healing looks like. It's not a destination, not a place you arrive at and stay forever. It's a practice, a daily, hourly, moment-by-moment practice of choosing yourself. Some days, you'll slip back into old patterns. Some days, the hypervigilance will return. The fawning will kick in. The need to manage everyone around you will feel as urgent as it ever did. That's okay. That's normal. That's what healing from deep wounds actually looks like. It's not linear. It's a spiral, circling back over the same ground, but at a higher elevation each time. You'll recognize the old patterns faster. You'll recover more quickly. And gradually, the new way will become more natural than the old. The internal family systems model, developed by psychologist Richard Schwartz, offers a useful framework for this work. It suggests that we all have different parts, different aspects of ourselves that developed at different times for different purposes. The peacemaker part of you isn't bad. It isn't something to be ashamed of or exterminated. It helped you survive. It kept you connected to your family when disconnection might have been catastrophic. It got you through childhood intact. That part deserves gratitude, not contempt. But that part also needs to learn that its job is done. The child who needed to keep the peace doesn't exist anymore. The family system you were trying to stabilize, you don't live there anymore. You're an adult now. You have resources that child didn't have. You can protect yourself in ways that child couldn't. You can leave situations that child was trapped in. You can choose relationships that child had no choice about. You have options now. You have power. You have a self that can do the protecting so the peacemaker part can finally rest. The work is helping that inner peacemaker part understand that it can stand down now, that the war is over, that someone else, the adult you, is in charge and can navigate the world without the constant vigilance, the perpetual scanning, the endless accommodation. The peacemaker part doesn't need to be killed or exiled. It needs to be retired with honors, thanked for its service, given a new role that doesn't involve carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions. There's a particular kind of loneliness that peacemakers carry. It's unlike other kinds of loneliness because it happens in the presence of people. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who need you, but who never think to ask how you are. It's the loneliness of being everyone's rock, everyone's support system, everyone's first call in a crisis, but never having a rock of your own. It's the loneliness of being so attuned to everyone else's inner world that your own inner world becomes a mystery even to you. It's the loneliness of knowing everyone deeply while being deeply unknown. If that loneliness resonates, if you're reading this feeling like finally someone understands, I want you to know you're not alone in it. There are millions of people who grew up exactly the same way, who carry the same hidden exhaustion, the same invisible wounds, the same confusion about who they are underneath the role. They're in therapy offices and support groups and online forums and comment sections, finally naming what happened to them, finally recognizing that their coping mechanisms were adaptive genius, not character flaws. And here's the beautiful, terrible truth. The very sensitivity that made you vulnerable to becoming the family peacemaker is the same sensitivity that will help you heal. Your ability to attune to others, that finely calibrated instrument you developed for survival, can be turned inward, toward yourself. You can learn to read your own emotional states with the same precision you read everyone else's. Your capacity for compassion, so freely given to others for so long, can be directed where it's needed most, toward the child you were, who did the best they could with what they had, and toward the adult you're becoming, who deserves every bit of gentleness you've given to everyone else. You learned how to take care of others before you learned how to be a child. The order was wrong, the burden was unfair, but you survived it. You're still here, And now you get to learn how to take care of yourself while being an adult. The sequence that should have been learning to have needs, then learning to meet others' needs. You get to do it now. It's not too late. It's never too late. The childhood you lost isn't recoverable, but the future you deserve is still available. And it starts the moment you decide that keeping the peace is no longer more important than keeping yourself. So here's my invitation to you. If any of this has landed, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns, if you're tired in the way I've been describing, the tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, the exhaustion of perpetual vigilance, consider what it would mean to put down the clipboard, to stop taking emotional inventory of everyone in the room, to walk into a space and not immediately assess who's okay and who needs managing, to let other people have their feelings without making those feelings your responsibility. Consider what it would mean to disappoint someone, not maliciously, not carelessly, but simply by choosing yourself, by saying no when you don't have capacity, by being unavailable when you need rest, by letting the peace get disrupted and trusting that the world won't end, that adults can handle their own conflicts, that it's not on you to hold everything together. Consider what it would mean to take up space in your own life, to have opinions that aren't immediately calibrated to what others want to hear, to have needs that you express without apology, to have boundaries that you enforce without guilt, to exist not as a function but as a person. And consider what it would mean to grieve, to let yourself feel the full weight of what was taken from you, to cry for the child who had to grow up too fast, who had to become the adult before they'd finished being a kid, who had to hold everyone together when they themselves were falling apart inside, to mourn the childhood you didn't get, the needs that went unmet, the self that went underground and is only now beginning to emerge. You survived something that nobody acknowledged, something that looked like maturity from the outside but felt like drowning from the inside, something that earned you praise when it should have earned you protection. You developed coping mechanisms that were brilliant and adaptive and absolutely necessary at the time. And now that you're safe, now that you're grown, now that you have resources that child never had, you can finally start to heal. The family peacemaker is a role. It's not who you are. It's not your identity, not your essence, not the core of your being. It's something you learned to do because the alternative was unbearable. And just like any learned behavior, it can be unlearned. It can be thanked for its service and retired. It can be replaced with something healthier, something more balanced, something that includes you in the circle of care instead of always placing you outside it, watching, managing, absorbing everyone else's storms while your own storms go unacknowledged. You are not put on this earth to regulate your family's emotions. That was never supposed to be your job. You are not born to be the buffer between your parents, the mediator of their conflicts, the emotional janitor cleaning up their messes, the stabilizer of a system that should have been stable without you. You were born to be you, fully, authentically, unapologetically you, with your own feelings and needs and desires and boundaries, with your own storms and sunshine, with your own life to live, not just other people's lives to manage. It's time to meet that person, the you underneath the role, the you that existed before the role was assigned, The you that's been waiting all these years for permission to come out. They've been waiting for you. They've been waiting your whole life. And they're tired of keeping the peace.